my clients ran newsrooms on 3 different continents. She had covered wars, managed huge teams, sat across from prime ministers. And when I first met her, she couldn't tell me who she was without handing me her old job title first. She'd been made redundant, and the thing that broke her wasn't the money or even the job itself. It was that she genuinely didn't know what was left of her once she took the title away. After a few months of working with me, she had started her own company, she was hiring people, and she was introducing herself as a founder without flinching. Hi, I'm Dr. Fofo, and I've spent over 2 decades coaching leaders across 7 regions, from teams of a few hundred to teams of 35,000 and more. And I want to walk you through exactly what we changed, because the shift that God had there is almost never the one people expect. So let me take you back to where she actually was, because if you've ever been high up in an organization, some of this is going to feel uncomfortably familiar. On paper, she had everything: decades of experience, a reputation people would recognize, the kind of experience that opens doors. But she'd been in senior roles for so long that her whole sense of who she was had fused with what she did. And when the redundancy came, all of that came off in one go. The way she put it has stuck with me. She said, none of my friends are calling anymore, and she hadn't even had to write a CV in years. So she genuinely didn't know where she'd even start. And underneath all of it was this feeling that she was a fraud. Because if she wasn't the person with the title, then who was she supposed to be in the room? I want to be honest about why this matters to you, even if you're nowhere near redundancy, because the same trap is sitting underneath a lot of successful careers. When your identity is built on your position, you're only ever one restructure, one bad quarter, one industry shift away from that same freefall. She just happened to hit it all at once, which means her story shows you the whole thing in fast forward. Most people get it in slow motion and never quite name what's happening to them. So the first thing we had to do wasn't strategy. It was definitely also wasn't updating her LinkedIn. It was something slower. And if we had skipped it, everything built on top would have collapsed later. I take clients through what I call the 3A approach. And the first A is awareness. Before you can rebuild anything, you have to see clearly what you're actually working with. And that starts with peeling back the layers. So we sat with the hard questions, the ones she'd been avoiding, without the degrees, without the titles, without the org chart. Who are you, and what do you genuinely bring to the world? That sounds simple until you try to answer it about yourself. And this is the part most ambitious people get wrong. They assume their value lives in their role. So when the role goes, they think the value went with it. But it didn't, because it was never in the title in the first place. The title was just the place her value happened to be pointing for a while. What we were doing in this phase was separating the two, so she could see the strengths that were hers to keep, no matter what building she walked into. And the reason this has to come first is that confidence built on a job is borrowed confidence. You're renting it from your employer, and they can take it back. The whole point of starting here is to move someone from finding their worth in their position to finding it in what they can actually do, because that's the only version that survives a bad year. Once she could see herself a bit more clearly, we moved into the second phase, and this is where the momentum actually started, because awareness on its own doesn't change anything if you don't act on what you find. We ran a proper strength-based assessment, and what surfaced was interesting. For years, she'd assumed her value was being senior, being experienced, being the person who'd been everywhere. But the thing she was genuinely world-class at was narrower and far more useful than that. She could walk into a chaotic, high-pressure situation, calm it down, and tell the story underneath it in a way people understood. She'd been doing it for decades in journalism without ever thinking of it as a transferable skill. She thought it was just the job, and that distinction turned out to be the whole game. As long as she believed storytelling was something newsrooms needed, losing the newsroom felt like losing her purpose. The moment she saw it as a strength she carried rather than a task her employer assigned, the same skill suddenly had 100 doors instead of 1. This is the shift I care most about with clients. Because when your identity is attached to a strength instead of a seat, nobody can make you redundant from it. So the payoff of this phase wasn't a new job title. It was that she stopped grieving the old one, because she finally understood that the thing that made her good had walked out of the building with her, not stayed behind in it. The last phase was about visibility, because a strength nobody can see doesn't move your life forward. And at her level, the rooms that matter aren't the ones you apply to. We built what I think of as a 0 to hero plan, going from stuck to unstoppable, one layer at a time. Part of it was deciding what she wanted to be known for now, on her own terms, rather than reaching for whatever job looked closest to the old one. And part of it was practical, how she'll introduce herself at a networking event without leaning on a title she no longer had. How she'll talk about her value in a way that felt true rather than boastful. And how she'll get in front of the people who could actually open a door. Now, at her seniority, most real opportunities never appear on a job board, and that catches a lot of experienced people out. They keep refreshing LinkedIn while the actual roles are being decided in conversations they're not part of. So the work here was getting her comfortable and credible in those conversations so that when someone asked what she did, the answer built her up instead of reminding her of what she lost. And what came out of it was something we hadn't scripted at the start. Rather than chase another executive seat, she took the storytelling strength and built a business around it, helping companies manage change and communicate through it. The visibility work didn't just get her back to where she was. It pointed her somewhere she never had reached from inside the old role. So where did all that actually land? Because I know that's the part you want to hear. Within a couple of months, she had gone from not being able to introduce herself without a title to running her own company. She's since hired people, the business has global clients, and she holds the title she gave herself now, founder and CEO. But the number I actually care about is harder to put on a slide. She got her self-worth back, and this time it wasn't attached to anything anyone could take from her. If the business changed shape tomorrow, she'll be fine because she's not standing on a job anymore. She's standing on herself. That's the result that doesn't show up in a salary band, and it's the one that lasts. And I want to be really clear about something before we finish, because it matters. She did the work. I gave her the questions and the structure, but she was the one who sat in the discomfort of not knowing who she was for a while, who did the honest looking, who walked into those rooms and introduced herself as someone new. I've watched a lot of people get to the edge of that and then turn back. She didn't. If I'm honest about what I'll do differently, I'd have pushed her to name the strength sooner. We spent longer than we needed to in the grieving part, and looking back, the storytelling was visible early. I was being gentle when a bit more directedness could have served her better, and that's a note I've carried into the work I do now. If any of this landed a little too close to home, if you've had that quiet thought that a lot of who you are is really just your job, then that's worth paying attention to before life forces the question the way it forced hers. If you'd like to talk it through, there's a link below to book a call, and it really is just a conversation to figure out where you're actually at. Now, the thing that saved her wasn't a new job. It was realizing her value had never lived in her title in the first place. But there's a specific version of this that hits people who are still employed and doing well, where you're not lost at all. You're just slowly becoming invisible in a role you're too good at to leave. That one's quieter and honestly more dangerous. So watch this next video where I'll show you why your most reliable people, maybe you, are the ones least likely to get promoted and what to do about it. You can also download some helpful resources in the link below. I'll see you in the next one. Be unstoppable.